Next time tappu will not be done. Hari Om. Let's start with the prayer. Om Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravidam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Amadeva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Urudeva Deva. Hari Om. We are looking at the Upanishadic statement that the Brahman alone is, because Neha Nanasti Kinchana Ekameva Advitiyam, and using that Ekameva Advitiyam Neha Nanasti Kinchana, and in the Viveka Chudamani, Shankara composes many slokas, that meditation slokas, for us to recognize that Brahman alone is, in spite of the differences of Sajati, Vijati, Swagata, Vedas, in spite of plurality that I see. I cannot see Brahman, but I can see the world, Jagat, I can see Jivas, I can see Jagat, I can see whole life itself, but in and through the world and the sea, I had to see or recognize or cognize that there is something which is changeless entity in all the changing things, because the whole world is changing continuously, the body, mind, intellect is changing, and continuously life goes on, and that which comes and goes, that which is born has to die, and you see many lives are coming, new lives are coming, and the old people are living, and generations are going on, and centuries and centuries are going on, but in and through these continuously changing things, there has to be changeless entity, because that's a law. Law is, if something changes, there has to be changeless entity. That's what the whole chemistry is based on, the balancing equation. Balancing is because A plus B is becoming to C plus D. A plus B is changing into C plus D, but in that change, there has to be something conserved, and that's why we try to balance it. Balancing means the matter on this side has to be same as the matter in this inside, because matter can neither be created or destroyed. Only form of AB, matter in AB form is changing into CD form. In the same way, a law of conservation from the pure existence that Krishna gave in the second chapter, 16th sloka, Vasato Vijjate Bhavo, Na Bhavo Vijjate Sataha. So that which exists can never cease to exist, that which is non-existent can never come into existence. Therefore, it is an absolute law of conservation that Krishna mentioned, which can be applied for a matter and also for the energy, but more than matter and energy, which is still a matter, and Krishna applies to the absolute, the consciousness itself, because Natvevaham Jatunasam Natvam Nemi Janadipaha. There was never a time I was not there, never a time you were not there. So law of conservation is absolute in terms of even for the soul, or even for the Atma. And that in fact is the foundation for the Vedanta, because that was there before creation, and that which cannot is infinite, that existence, and existence cannot cease to become existent, because if existence cease to become, if existence cannot cease, that's what Krishna's statement is. That which exists before the creation is existence itself, and therefore existence cannot be destroyed, and that existence itself is expressing in different names and forms. So forms keep changing, names keep changing along with the forms, but what doesn't change is the pure existence. Existence in this form is changing into existence in another form, and this is expressed in the Upanishad by giving an example of a worldly example, like gold becoming into ornaments. Ring may change into bangle, but in the change of a ring into bangle, there is something conserved, and the conserve is gold should remain the same. In the same way, that which is the indestructible, and that which is avyayam, that is which cannot undergo any modifications and which cannot deteriorate, is essentially nirgunam, nishkalam, sukshmam, nirvikalpam, niranjanam, ekameva advitiyam brahma, nehana nasti kinchana. We'll go to second sloka, 471, maybe fourth sloka. Anirupya swarupam, anirupya swarupam, yanmano vacham agocharam, yanmano vacham agocharam, ekameva dvayam brahma, nehana nasti kinchana. So anirupyam swarupam, anirupya swarupam, yan mano vacham agocharam, and ekameva advitiyam brahma nehana nasti kinchana. So we analyzed already ekameva advitiyam brahma, that's from Chandogya Upanishad, and nehana nasti kinchana, the Kathopanishad, and this essentially indicates that whatever I see, plurality, is not really reality, and what is there is only pure Brahman, which is one without a second. So anirupyam is, there is no form for it. Anirupyam is, there is no rupam. So, and also anirupam. Nirupam is, it cannot be definitely this, that. We cannot essentially differentiate, and there is no form in which are described. Therefore, it is essentially impossible to describe. That's why yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. Any description is not really valid, and all we are describing is that which is indescribable by this. And what the scripture provides is by providing only Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam Brahma, Advaitam Brahma. Even those words Advaitam is only from the point of reference of Dvaitam only. Whatever I see, Dvaitam is not that. So I had to look for that which is changeless in the changing entity. That has to be Advaitam, because we are talking about all Dvaita only on the upper end creation, but there is something that's substantive for the whole creation, that which is Advaitam, because it's the same across, that pervades everything. Krishna says, Maya tadamidam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina. I pervade this entire universe in unmanifested form. So unmanifested is anirupyam. And nirupa swarupam asadhyam. So anirupyam and anirupya swarupam. Its nature of the rupam, its form itself is indescribable. So indescribable form. Indescribable means which is something existing, it's not sunyam. At the same time I cannot describe it. So it is there, but it cannot be described, because any description is possible only for finite things. I can describe this compared to that, because any description is a differentiation of that object from the rest of the objects in the universe. That should be precise description, and that is called nirupanam. And anirupyam is indescribable because it is anantam, it is infinite, and therefore it is anirupya swarupam. Its nature itself is infinite. That's why satyam, jnanam, anantam. And satyam is sat. Pure existence cannot be described. I can only describe the existence of an object, but existence itself cannot be described, and existence cannot be an attribute also, because some acharyas define that Sat, Chit, Ananda are attributes of the Brahman. If Sat is an attribute of a Brahman, this is from the Advaita Makaranda. He says, if Sat is an attribute, then attribute has to be locus in something, and the locus should be different from the attribute. So it is a Nila Utpalam. So it's a blue lotus. Blueness is different from lotusness. Blueness is locus in the lotusness, and therefore the lotusness and blueness, although are one, looking as one object, but the adjective cannot exist by itself. It has to be locused in an object, and therefore the attribute belongs to the object, Visheshyam. So this cannot be separated at all. So therefore, if Sat is an attribute of of Brahman, then that attribute has to be different from Sat. What is different from Sat is only Asat. That means non-existence is only different from existence, because everything is existence only. So non-existence can only be left out, and you say non-existence is a locus for existence. So that is actually contradiction in terms. Therefore, Sat cannot be an attribute, and Chit also cannot be an attribute, and Chit should be an attribute of unconscious entity. So unconscious entity cannot become a conscious entity. And therefore, Anantam, Satyam Jnanam Anantam. Anantam is infinite. Infinite itself is not a description, and infinite is not an attribute, its very nature. In fact, Satyam, Jnanam also cannot be defined. So knowledge, Jnana means knowledge. Knowledge cannot be defined. Epistemology, it's called epistemology, description of the knowledge or how knowledge takes place. And the knowledge cannot be defined. What is knowledge? If you go on Google and ask for what is knowledge, even they will describe knowledge of this only. That means only objective knowledge can be defined, but knowledge without any qualification, because there is no object there, and Brahman is not an object, and knowledge of Brahman cannot be described. It is the nature of Brahman itself is knowledge, because knowledge takes place because of the consciousness, and it's the nature of consciousness is infiniteness. Prajnanam Brahma, consciousness itself is infinite and it's indescribable. Therefore, Anirupya Swarupam Yan Manovacha Amagocharam You know, Manovacham Agocharam. Manovacham agocharam. So manovacham agocharam. So manaha vacham. Neither speech nor the mind. One cannot talk about it. One cannot describe about it. Talk means describe about it, because any description is only about in terms of attributes. And manas, the mind also cannot see it. So Yato vacho nivartanti, that we have already quoted. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. The mind cannot reach there, or the speech cannot reach there. They return back without able to describe it. At the same time, the scripture are defining or describing pages and pages about it. Only that is because they are pointers. They are lakshana vakyas, not the vachya, that means not the direct meaning of the words, not vachartham. Lakshartham has to be taken. They are pointing in that direction. You have to leave the pointer and go. Swami Chinmayananda used to say, you want to see the moon, you also look at the tree, and between the trees you see the flower, and go, and then if you look at the direction, you will see the moon. So we had to look through the pointers and leave the tree, leave the leaf, leave the flower, and go beyond to see what it is. Then it is obviously visible. So these are only pointers called lakshyartham, pointing in the direction. That's how Vedanta teaches the nature of the reality without really showing you this is nature of reality. It's only lakshyartham. Laksham is pointing something, lakshyam, aim, goal, and that is being pointed out in the use of words. The words are used by a teacher conveniently to uplift the mind of the student to go beyond the words, and that's essentially what the teaching is. That's why the teacher has to be there, and you have to approach a teacher because he knows how to use the words properly so that a mind can see beyond. Otherwise, you will be getting confused and wrong understanding only will come. So, yan mano vachanugocharam. So, navagachati namanaha. The mind cannot go there, or the speech can. So, yad vacha anabhyuditam ena vak abhyudyate tadeva brahma tvam viddhi nedam yadidam upasate yan manasa namanute ena hurumanomatam tadeva brahma tvam viddhi nedam yadidam upasate yad chachusha napasyati ena chachum supasyati tadeva brahma tvam viddhi nedam yadidam upasate. This statement, Nedam Yidam Upasate, it's not that what you are worshipping is Brahman. That's okay up to some point, because you need to use that for purification. But now you have to go beyond that. You are a now student whose mind is prepared. Now you have to uplift. You go beyond the elementary class to go to higher class. You have to drop all that and go to the higher. That's essentially This scripture is guiding sadhak to go beyond. This is yat chakshusha na pasyati, eyes cannot see because it's not a form, but ena chakshunsu pasyati, that because of which eyes have a capacity to see, that life principle, that because of the enlivening consciousness, because the only unconscious entities cannot see, that consciousness which is expressing through the eyes, because of which I can see, I can talk, I can listen, all that is because of that, not this what you worship. And therefore, Manovacham agocharam ekameva advitiyam brahma and nehana nasti kinchana. And these have to be contemplated on while seeing and while talking or while listening. Says, what is that because of which I am able to see? What is that because of which I am able to think? It's not the thoughts, it is because of which I have able to capacity, that consciousness that I am. And that has to be shifting my mental attention to that, and that's what essentially recognition or realization, and that has to be done through the vichara, by inquiry, using the sukshma buddhi or using the viveka, which is a discriminative faculty of what is permanent here and what is not changing things here. In the changing things, there is a permanent here, there. And that I have to pick up because it's not obvious. Being infinite, I cannot see it. At the same time, it is there also. And that has to be understood. So, ekameva dvidiyam brahma nehana nasti kinchana. Go to sloka 472. Sat samruddham swatasiddham suddham buddham anidrusham. Sat samuddham swatasiddham suddham buddham anidrusham. Ekameva dvayam brahma nehana nasti kinchana. Sat samruddham, it is full of sat, existence itself, and it is always there. It cannot be negated. I can negate one form to the other. I can not negate the pure existence. Existence cannot be, because it's infinite. The one who is negating itself has to exist. So existence itself, I cannot negate myself because I have to be there to negate myself. Not only I am conscious entity, I am existent entity. So I cannot negate my own existence, and every other existence, scripture says that I cannot negate, because the existence of an object is become an existence as a thought in my mind. Because when I say object is, that isness of the object is transferred as though as a thought, with the attributes of the object as the attributes of the thought or contents of the thought. So the existence of a thought is the existence of the object, and the existence of the thought has to join with the consciousness of the subject that I am, for me to be conscious of the existence of the thought, therefore conscious of the existence of the object around the world. So with the object, the senses and the thought and the mind all have to be there, with the consciousness illumining all that, to establish the existence of any object. The object doesn't say I am there. I have to say object is there. All that is implied here. So essentially, Sat Samruddham, it is full with existence. I cannot see anything without existence. I cannot imagine anything without existence, because for something to imagine, for me, imagination is only in terms of attributive content, and there has to be locus. I can imagine all sorts of things. I can imagine even the hair with horns also, even though I don't see hair with horns, because I know what are the horns, I know what is the hair, and I can assemble it in my mind, and I can project it in my dream or imaginations also. And therefore, Sat Samruddham, existence has to be there in both the conscious entity and in the world also. Swatasiddham, it is self-existing also. And Suddham, it is pure. And Buddham essentially is the nature of the knowledge. And Anidrusham, it is incomparable. There is no comparison, because I cannot, there have to be two to compare it, and it's only one of a kind. Therefore, Ekameva Dvitiyam, therefore there is nothing to say how it is similar to this, it's similar to this. All the examples are only temporary examples to lift my mind to something beyond. and those are essentially has to be, there is no the incomparable, because it's one of a kind, and therefore it is the, you cannot say it is equal to something. So Swata Siddham, it is existing by itself. It doesn't depend on anything other than itself for its existence, whereas everything else depends on it. And Suddham, we say already, right? It is Niranjanam, it is Suddham. It is pure, because impurity is something other than itself. There is nothing other than itself for it to get impure, and therefore it is pure. Even when the mind is impure, it itself is illumining it. It's not pure because it is Asangaha, untouched by it, and therefore it is always pure. And Buddha Swarupam, that is the nature of the intelligence, that is the nature of the consciousness, and anidrisham, and incomparable, and therefore ekameva advitiyam dehana nasti kinchana. So that is the nature of Brahman. So this Brahman alone is there, and everything else is only apparent. So I had to see in and through the world. I had to see that which is pervades that, which is ekameva advitiyam Brahma, which is imperceptible, because any perception is only for an object, and this is infinite, avyaktam, and therefore I cannot see, I cannot touch, I cannot see, I cannot imagine. So sakshatkaram and all that is only for a form, but the truth is cannot be seen, but can be known. It's not a negative, it's not a zero or sunyam. It is because of the consciousness, because of which I can see everything else, but consciousness cannot become object of the consciousness, and therefore it is the very reality of your own self, and that's what is to be. And this slokas ekameva advitiyam Brahma nehana nasti kinchana is repeated, and these are for the meditation purposes. And now the teacher is going to give a final the instructions to the student before he ends the teaching itself. That we will take in the next talk. With this we stop. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.